The Senate will now be in session. All rise for the arrival of the Honorable Senate President and the Senators of the Republic of the Philippines.
The 58th session of the Senate and the first regular session of the 19th Congress is hereby called to order. We'd like to recognize Senator Christopher Lawrence Go to lead the chamber in prayer.
Dear God, dear Allah, dear Almighty One, as we gather here today in this hallowed chamber, we bow our heads in humility and seek your guidance and wisdom. We ask for your divine intervention and wisdom as we perform our sworn duties as servants of the sovereign Filipino people. Lord, we pray for our nation that we may be a beacon of peace, unity, and prosperity. We pray for our leaders that they may be guided by your wisdom and be strengthened in their resolve to lead our country towards a brighter future. Dalangin po namin ang aming mga kababayang Pilipino na mapangalagaan sila at ligtas sa panganib. We ask for your protection over our nation and our people, that we may be free from fear and violence, so that we shall continue to build a just and humane society. Panginoon, alam po namin na nasa iyong biyaya at awa, kayang-kaya namin malampasan ang anumang hamon na darating sa amin bilang isang matatag at nagkakaisang bansa, mga hamon na susubok sa katatagan ng aming pagka-Pilipino. Hangad po namin ang iyong patnubay sa lahat ng aming mga gawain ngayong araw at mga gagawin sa hinaharap. Hinihiling po namin ang lahat ng ito sa iyong banal na pangalan. Siya nawa. Amen.
Secretary, please call the roll.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senator Angara, Senator Binay, Senator Cayetano Alan, Senator Cayetano Pia, Senator De La Rosa, Senator Ejercito, Senator Escudero, Senator Estrada, Senator Gatchalian, Senator Go, Senator Ontiveros, Senator Lapid, Senator Legarda, Senator Marcos, Senator Padilla, Senator Pimentel, Senator Poe, Senator Revilla, Senator Tolentino, Senator Tulfo, Senator Villanueva, Senator Villar Cynthia, Senator Villar Mark, the Senate President.
With 23 senators present, the chair declares the presence of a quorum. Majority Leader?
Yes, Mr. President, today is such a special day in the session hall because today we would like to acknowledge and welcome the presence of His Excellency Niyazi Evren Akyol, Turkish Ambassador to the Philippines, and
Welcome to the Senate, Your Excellency.
his company, Mr. President. Thank you. And everyone with him, Mr. President. I was about to acknowledge our former colleague, Mr. President, but he's not yet inside
Would
the
you like to proceed
building.
first with the reference of business?
Yes, Mr. President.
While awaiting our dear colleague.
At this juncture, Mr. President, may I also acknowledge some guests from the gallery, if I may, Mr. President.
Yes.
We also have with us, Mr. President, the top finisher in the 2023 World Marathon Challenge Women's category, the pride of the Philippines, Miss Julie Uchat, with her husband, Mr. James Gashel, Christopher Havelosa and Myra Havelosa are also here, Mr. President. We also have with us, Mr. President, guests of Senator Angara, Davao del Sur Congressman John Tracy Cagas, Zamboanga del Norte 3rd District Congressman Ian Amatong, Kadijay Bohol Mayor Tomar Olaivar. We also have with us guests of Senator Gatchalian, Oriental Mindoro Vice Governor EJ Falcon. EJ Falcon, Mr. President. Mr. President, guests of Senator J.B. Ejercito, Islamic Council of the City of Malolos, may kababayan, headed by Haji Yaha Gamor and officials. Also, Mr. President, the Regent and Chancellor of Mindanao State University, guest of Senator Alan Cayetano, Attorney Alizedni Titukalan, Mr. President. Also with us is our Representative Bing Maniquez of the 2nd District of Zambales and Mayor Ronald Apostol of Cabangan, Zambales. We welcome them, Mr. President, in this August
Yes.
chamber.
Welcome to the Senate. Welcome to your Senate, ladies and gentlemen, and also to our fellow public servants. While we are waiting to take up the first item of the agenda, I think we're awaiting our former colleague to come. We could proceed to approval of journal as well as reference of business.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. President. At this juncture, Mr. President, I move that we dispense with the reading of the Journal of the 57th Session, Monday, March 6, 2023, and consider the same as approved.
There being no objection to the motion, motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
There being no objection, the Secretary may proceed with the reference of business.
Bills on first reading. Senate number 1952, converting the Sablayan, Agpanabat, Bagakay Road, a section of the Romblon Circumferential Road into a national road, and appropriating funds therefore. Senator Marcos.
For the Committees on Public Works and Finance.
1953, establishing in the municipality of Sablayan, province of Occidental Mindoro, a tertiary hospital to be known as the Sablayan Medical Center, appropriating funds therefore. Senator Marcos.
To the Committee on Rules.
1954, converting the road which starts at Postnaan, municipality of Aguinaldo, province of Ifugao, traverses the municipality of Alfonso Lista in the province of Ifugao and ends at the boundary of the municipality of Aurora in the province of Isabela, into a national road and appropriating funds therefore. Senator Marcos.
To the Committee on Rules.
1955, providing for the delineation of the specific forest limits of the public domain and for other purposes. Senator Revilla Jr.
To the Committees on Environment, Natural Resources, Local Government, and Finance.
1956, converting the city road passing from Barangays Luna, Dolores, Milagro, and Tongonan leading to Lake Danao in the city of Ormoc, province of Leyte, into national road and appropriating funds therefore. Senator Marcos.
To the Committee on Rules.
1957, declaring the province of Agusan del Sur as the home of the Golden Tara. Senator Marcos.
To the Committee on Culture and Arts and Tourism.
1958, promoting sustainable and alternative modes of transportation and other mobility options to improve air quality, increase efficiency, reduce congestion, and contribute to positive health impacts in our society. Senator Villar M.
Committees on Sustainable Development Goals, Environment, Natural Resources, and Finance.
1959, mandating the installation of timers and traffic lights and pedestrian lights. Senator Villar M.
To the Committees on Public Works, Public Services, and Finance.
1960, institutionalizing the Poverty Reduction through Social Entrepreneurship Program and promoting social enterprises, providing funds and for other purposes. Senator Revilla Jr.
Committees on Trade and Commerce, Social Justice, and Finance.
1961, institutionalizing an emergency medical services system, creating for the purpose the National EMSS Council, appropriating funds therefore. Senator Revilla Jr.
Committees on Health and Demography, Local Government, and Finance.
1962, amending certain sections of RA 10845 and for other purposes. Senator Villar C.
Committees on Agriculture, Justice and Human Rights, Ways and Means.
1963, establishing anti-agricultural smuggling court, granting them exclusive regional jurisdiction over cases involving agricultural products, appropriating funds and for other purposes. Senator Villar C.
Committees on Justice and Human Rights, Agriculture, and Agrarian Reform and Finance.
Resolutions. Proposed Senate Resolution 515, congratulating and recognizing the National Jiu-Jitsu team for their impressive win in the 7th Asian Jiu-Jitsu Championship held thus February 24 to 28, 2023 in Bangkok, Thailand. Senator Revilla Jr.
The Committee on Rules.
516, commending Julie Uychiat for being the first Filipina to finish and win 4 of the 7 marathons in the 2023 World Marathon Challenge. Senator Binay.
To the Committee on Rules.
518, directing the appropriate Senate committee to conduct an inquiry into the brazen assassination of incumbent Negros Oriental Governor Roel Digamo and the spate of recent political assassination or attempted political assassinations in the various areas of the country. Senator Ontiveros.
Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs.
519, congratulating and commending Carlos Edriel Pokis Yulo for his impressive medal haul in the 2023 International Gymnastics Federation Artistic Gymnastics World Cup Series held in Doha, Qatar. Senator Villanueva.
Committee on Rules.
522, congratulating and commending Filipino international marathon runner Julie Uychiat for being the fastest Filipino to run and win 4 out of 7 races in the 2023 World Marathon Challenge. Senator Cayetano P.
To the Committee on Rules.
523, expressing the profound sympathy and sincere condolences of the Senate of the Philippines on the death of the former Minister of Commerce and Industry, Roberto Velayo Ongpin, by Senators Zubiri, Villanueva, Cayetano P., and Escudero.
To the Committee on Rules.
524, expressing the sense of the Senate to urge the Climate Change Commission to establish a multi-factor partnership on the enhancement of climate and disaster risk financing and insurance to strengthen the economic resiliency of the Philippines in the face of climate change. Senator Ejercito.
Committee on Rules.
525, congratulating and commending Filipino gymnast Carlos Yulo for completing the 2023 FIG Artistic Gymnastics World Cup Series with a gold medal in the PET floor exercise event, a silver medal in the parallel bars, and a bronze medal in the vault event held in Doha, Qatar. Senator Lapid.
To the Committee on Rules.
526, congratulating and commending the Philippine team for bagging 4 gold and 2 bronze medals in the 2023 Asian Jiu-Jitsu Championships in Bangkok, Thailand. Senator Lapid.
Committee on Rules.
527, congratulating and commending the national rowing team for their exemplary performance and outstanding achievements in the 2023 World Rowing Indoor Championships. Senator Lapid.
To the Committee on Rules.
528, congratulating and commending Filipino international master Daniel Quizon for his victory in the AQ Prime ASEAN Chess Championship. Senator Lapid.
Committee on Rules.
529, congratulating and commending Yanri Ubas for winning a bronze medal in the men's heptathlon at the 2023 Asian Indoor Athletics Championship held in Astana, Kazakhstan on February 12, 2023. Senator Lapid.
Committee on Rules.
530, congratulating and commending the Philippine squash team after bagging 2 gold medals in the 23rd International Jumbo Doubles for the President's Cup held at the Tanglin Cup in Singapore on February 16 to 19, 2023. Senator Lapid.
To the Committee on Rules.
531, congratulating and commending E-Gilas Pilipinas national team for winning the Southeast Asian Regional Crown in eFIBA Section 1 NBA 2K tournament. Senator Lapid.
Committee on Rules.
532, congratulating and commending Christian Bernardo and Alvin Morada for capturing a gold medal in the 2023 Iran International Badminton Challenge held in February 5, 2023 in Tehran, Iran. Senator Lapid.
Committee on Rules.
533, congratulating and commending the Philippine team after winning a bronze medal in the first FIDE Chess Olympiad for people with disabilities held from January 29 to February 5, 2023 in Belgrade, Serbia. Senator Lapid.
Committee on Rules. Majority Leader.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr.
I see
President,
somebody, Mr.
the
Majority.
legend is in the house.
I know. I
And
know.
we would like to acknowledge and welcome our dear colleague, the Honorable, the only one, Richard Gordon, Senator Richard Gordon, the Chairman and Chief Executive of Philippine Red Cross. And he is accompanied by Ms. Gwendolyn Pang, Secretary General of Philippine Red Cross.
Should we suspend the rules and allow him to give a privileged speech?
I think everyone misses him, Mr.
Yes.
President.
It is an honor for us to have in this chamber one of the pillars of our Philippine Senate. A man who stood by his principles, a man who stood by his principles, a man that the people can trust, and one of our most prolific members of this institution, no other than Senator Richard Gordon, who happens to be my ninong. And we'd like to also, Majority Leader, shall we proceed
Yes,
with
Mr. President.
the item at hand?
It's you.
So, this afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to have with us the Ambassador of the Republic of Turkey, His Excellency Niyazi Evren Akyol, and our former colleague, as I mentioned earlier, the indefatigable and principal member, former member of the Senate, Senator Richard J. Gordon, our Chief Executive Officer and Chairman of the Philippine Red Cross. And we have invited them both to be with us today to personally receive the Senate's resolution expressing the sense of the Senate's profound sympathy and sincere condolences to the people of Turkey on that catastrophic and devastating earthquake that had hit Turkey and Syria. Personally, ladies and gentlemen, I cannot fathom the idea of 50,000 lost lives. 50,000 people, ladies and gentlemen. And we have nothing but sympathies and condolences for the people of Turkey and Syria. We have also invited Chairman Gordon to receive the Senator's humble donation for the earthquake relief efforts in Turkey. Mind you, these are personal donations given by each and every senator for the people of Turkey and Syria. So, my dear colleagues, Majority Leader,
Yes, Mr. President, at this juncture, I move that proposed Senate Resolution number 480, taking into consideration proposed Senate Resolutions number 483, 487, and 498, entitled Resolution Expressing the Profound Sympathy and Sincere Condolences of the Philippine Senate to the casualties of the devastating earthquakes in the Republic of Turkey, be taken up by the Chamber. May I request, Mr.
Yes.
President?
yes, may we
May
we ask the Secretary to read the title of the measure?
Yes, Mr. President, please.
Resolution expressing the profound sympathies of the Philippine Senate to the casualties of the devastating earthquakes in Turkey and Syria.
Mr. President, may we request the distinguished gentleman from the great province of Isabela and the Republic of the Philippines, Senator Rafi Tulfo, to sponsor Senate Resolution number 480.
Our distinguished colleague from the province of Isabela, Davao, and the Republic of the Philippines, Senator Rafi Tulfo, is recognized.
Mr. President, my dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Merhaba to our esteemed Turkish ambassador, His Excellency Niyazi Evren Akiyol. I rise today to sponsor Senate Resolution number 480, which I filed a month ago, expressing the profound sympathies of the Senate to the victims and families affected by the devastating earthquakes that struck Turkey and Syria. To date, the death toll has reached a shocking number of 47,244, while hundreds of thousands of people are still displaced and in dire need of adequate shelter, food, and sanitation. The United Nations reports that an extensive humanitarian crisis persists. According to Mr. Alvaro Rodriguez, the UN resident coordinator in Turkey, the UN has appealed for $397.6 million to help Syrian victims and $1 billion in Turkey to cover emergency needs such as food, medicine, water, clothing, and shelter, but sadly, only 10% of which has been funded. Meanwhile, our embassies continue with their efforts in addressing the needs of the 77 affected Filipinos. We have brought the remains of our kababayan who died from the earthquake. And as of February 27, 2023, we welcome 9 families from Turkey, the first batch of our repatriated kababayans who were displaced by the massive earthquakes. I commend the Department of Foreign Affairs and the Department of Migrant Workers for their unwavering and continued efforts in giving aid to our sheltered and repatriated Filipinos. The people of Turkey and Syria are our friends and allies, and we stand with them in their time of need. We may not have the intensive physical capacity to provide aid, but nonetheless, we must extend our support in every possible way we can, no matter how big or small. I therefore urge my fellow senators to join me in standing in solidarity with the victims and families affected by these devastating calamities, and let them know that they are not alone in this struggle. Let us demonstrate our commitment to the values of compassion, empathy, and friendship that bind us together as a global community. Thank you, and good afternoon to all, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, my distinguished colleague.
Mr. President, next to co-sponsor the resolution is the distinguished gentleman from the great province of Cavite, Senator Francis Tolentino. I move that he be recognized, Mr. President.
Our distinguished colleague from the great province of Cavite, Senator Francis Tolentino, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I join Senator Tulfo in co-sponsoring Senate Resolution 480 as the principal sponsor likewise of Senate Resolution 487, which I filed 15 February of this year. I join the rest of the nation expressing its deepest sympathies and condolences to the victims of the earthquakes on February 6, 2023 in Syria and Turkey. Turkey, Mr. President, as I can recall, was one of the first country responders to give aid to our country last November 2013 when the Philippines was struck by Typhoon Yolanda or Haiyan. 2 days after the onslaught of Typhoon Haiyan, Kimse Yukmo, a Turkish aid organization, was one of the first international organizations to arrive and render aid here in the Philippines. They offered humanitarian aid, psychosocial support, and educational assistance to survivors and help in the rebuilding of homes. This assistance provided by such a Turkish aid organization somehow eased the pain and suffering of our countrymen at the time of great suffering. I saw them there, Mr. President. Nauna po talagang tumulong sa atin ang Turkey nung bagyong Yolanda. Now that Turkey and Syria experienced this damaging earthquake, it is only right that our country extend the same kindness, Mr. President. Modesty aside, nine men who served under me before as MMDA chairman went to Turkey to assist in the rescue operations as part of the Philippine contingent. Pinagmamalaki ko po sila. For these reasons, Mr. President, I call upon our distinguished colleagues to support the adoption of this resolution. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, next to co-sponsor the measures, the distinguished gentleman from the province of Cavite, Senator Ramon Bong Revilla Jr. I move that he be recognized.
Our
Mr. President.
distinguished colleague, Senator Ramon Bong Revilla Jr. is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. We join our colleagues in expressing our deepest condolences in the devastating earthquake that hit Turkey, Syria, and even some parts of Lebanon. Napakalalim ng sugat na iniwan sa puso ng mga naulila na iwanan. Habang pinapanood at nakikita natin ang mga kuha matapos ang lindol, hindi natin maiwasang madurog ang ating mga puso. Our hearts and prayers go out to more than 50,000 casualties, Mr. President. We join our affected brothers and sisters in praying that they be able to rise from the rubble and start anew. Dalangin nating mabigyan sila ng lakas upang sa kabila ng dagundong ng pagsubok sa kanilang nararanasan sila'y muling makabangon. But as we mourn, we also learn from the lessons that this catastrophic disaster has taught the world. This is why, as chairperson of Public Works Committee, I vow to ensure that our government agencies and instrumentalities will be the solid foundation on which our countrymen could depend on when disaster strikes. In fact, the committee has already commenced its hearings on the matter with a sense of urgency and commenced its hearing on the matter with a sense of urgency and profound understanding of the role that preparedness plays in times of crisis. Mapapanatag lamang ang loob ng taong bayan kung matitiyak natin sa kanila na ginagawa natin ang lahat ng ating makakaya upang hindi natin sapitin ang kalunos-lunos na pangyayaring ito. Alam natin na nature always wins. Subalit, hindi ba natin kayang pigilan ang sakuna? Maari naman nating pigilan ang pinsalan nito. Maraming salamat, Ginoong Pangulo.
Maraming salamat, Ginoong
Mr. President,
Senator Bong Revilla.
the distinguished gentleman from San Juan City and Davao City, Senator Bongo and Senator Jinggoy Estrada would like to just insert into the records their sponsorship speech, Mr. President.
Yes, and so would I, Majority Leader, if I may just insert into the records my sponsorship speech, although I'd just like to make mention really quickly, if there are no other members who are going to give a co-sponsorship speech to the ambassador of Turkey and to Senator Richard Gordon. For the record, it was Senator Richard Gordon who called me about a month ago, right after the earthquake. And my dear Ninong mentioned to me that the House of Representatives was going to give a donation of 10 million to the people of Turkey and Syria through the Red Cross, the Philippine Red Cross. I told him that there's 300 of them, there's only 24 of us. But yet, we were able to rise to the occasion, and each colleague of ours here, each senator donated 100,000 pesos personal money, personal funds of theirs to come up with a fund, and I doubled the amount so that we were able to come up with 2.5 million pesos to be donated to the Red Crescent Society of Turkey through the Philippine Red Cross. And we thank Senator Gordon for facilitating this for us, and we're happy that we can really help the good people of Turkey and Syria. Inshallah, the day will come that you will rise, all these devastation will rise from the ashes and will create even a stronger society in Turkey. So let us proceed, my dear colleague. And again, I'd like to thank all the 23 other senators that gave a donation to this cause. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, we thank our dear colleague, our idol, who inspired so many of us here in the Senate, Senator Gordon, and of course, Ambassador Akyol. Mr. President, at this juncture, may I move that all members of the Senate be made co-sponsors of the resolution. So move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move to adopt proposed Senate Resolution number 480, taking into consideration Senate Resolution numbers 483, 487, and 498.
There be no objection to the motion to adopt Senate Resolution number 480, taking into consideration Senate Resolutions 483, 487, and 498. There being no objections, the motion is approved. These Senate resolutions are hereby adopted.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. May we invite Ambassador Akyol to personally receive the Senate resolution from the Senate President, after which may we invite the Honorable Richard Gordon, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of the Philippine Red Cross, to receive the donation of senators for earthquake relief efforts in Turkey. May I ask, Mr. President, for a minute suspension?
Yes, session is suspended for 1 minute, and may I ask my colleagues from the Senate to join us when we give this donation to the people of Turkey and Syria through the Philippine Red Cross. Session suspended.
with the permission of the body, I move to consider proposed Senate Resolution number 471, taking into consideration proposed Senate Resolution numbers 516 and 522, and for the Secretary to read the title of the measure. This is the resolution commending Julie Uychat for being the first Filipina to finish the World Marathon Challenge.
There be no objection to the motion of the Majority Floor Leader. We ask Secretary to read the title of the measure.
Resolution congratulating and commending Julie Uychat for being the first Filipina to finish the World Marathon Challenge, winning 4 of the 7 marathons in its 2023 edition.
Mr. President, to sponsor the measure and with the permission of the body, may I be allowed, Mr. President, to deliver the sponsorship speech.
Please proceed, Majority Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, before I proceed, I failed to recognize and welcome to the Senate our good friend, the Ateneo Volleyball superstar, athlete, broadcaster, Ms. Gretchen Ho, is also here with us.
Hello,
We
welcome
welcome
to
her,
your
Mr.
Senate,
President.
Ma'am Gretchen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, isa pong napakalaking karangalan na mai-sponsoran ang Senate Resolution number 471 na naglalayong magbigay ng pagkilala at parangal sa ating kababayan, Pinay nurse Julie Uychat, na top finisher sa 2023 edition ng World Marathon Challenge. Mr. President, kapag nakakakita po tayo ng isang nurse na tumatakbo sa hallway ng isang ospital, ang unang pumapasok po sa ating isipan ay marahil mayroong emergency. Ngunit sa isang pambihirang pagkakataon, ang pagtakbo ng isang nurse ay naging simbolo ng dedikasyon, pag-asa, inspirasyon, at tagumpay. Mr. President, what better way to celebrate National Women's Month than honoring the Pinay nurse who made history as she bagged 4 out of the 7 intercontinental marathons in the 2023 World Marathon Challenge women's category. Today, we are honoring our kababayan, Miss Julie Uychat, a Negros-born nurse and marathoner, as she raced her way through the freezing Antarctica down to the lowlands of Miami. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, to give you an idea of how rigorous this marathon challenge was and how Nurse Julie triumphantly reached every finish line for 7 consecutive times. Here is the itinerary, Mr. President, commencing on the 31st of January and ending on the 6th of February, covering the following places: Novo in Antarctica, Cape Town in Africa, Perth in Australia, Dubai in Asia, Madrid in Europe, Brazil in South America, and lastly, Miami in North America. Mr. President, in each destination, all participants are expected to run for 42.2 kilometers, 7 times in a row, Mr. President. The participants spent 45 hours in the air via charter plane going from and to these 7 destinations. It goes to show, Mr. President, what Nurse Julie must have gone through to conquer all 7 marathons, to bring the top finisher title in the women's category, having to run a total of 295 kilometers to complete the entire race. Julie ruled the marathons in Asia, Europe, South America, and North America. Hindi din po siya nagpahuli, Ginoong Pangulo, sa 3 pang marathons as she placed 2nd, 3rd, and 4th in the Australia, Africa, and Antarctica marathons respectively. Ang distansya pong ito ay mas mahaba pa. Kung lalakarin ko po, Ginoong Pangulo, galing dito sa Senado, sa building na ito, pupunta po ako sa Atok, Benguet. Her unshakable grit, adaptability, endurance, and stamina are now not only seen when she dons her scrubs, but also when she wears her bib and running shoes. In 2015, Mr. President, Nurse Julie was influenced by her sister to take up running, as she complained that she could not even run from her house to the next stop sign without running short of breath. Her sister advised her to slow down, keep her pace, and that she won't die from running. This sparked her enthusiasm for the sport. And just as Kelly Clarkson said in her song, What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And stronger she became indeed. 2 years later, Mr. President, at the age of 43, she participated in her first individual race with no running background or prior professional training experience. But this became an important milestone in her taking up running seriously. Julie had to juggle her hectic work schedule and weekly training commitments as she joined her first marathon in 2017. Though strict discipline, dedication, and commitment, she Boston qualified. This is one of the 6 major marathons in the world, Mr. President. Alam na alam po namin ito ni Senator Angara. Come 2020, the world hits its pause button as the pandemic ran rampant. From being the flash in the truck, she had to equip her personal protective equipment and transform into another superhero persona, a nurse, Mr. President. She had to keep the marathon bibs under her PPE as she continued to inspire and help others get well to realize their dreams. At ngayon po, Ginoong Pangulo, matapos ang mga taon ng pagsubok, si Nurse Julie ay nagbalik sa marathon. Ngayong 2023, ang taon ng pagsulong at tagumpay, sa wakas ay nakamit na rin ni Nurse Julie ang isa sa kanyang pinakapinapangarap. Nasungkit po niya, Ginoong Pangulo, ang medalya sa 4 sa 7 intercontinental marathons. Nurse Julie does not only heal the skin-deep wounds of her patients, she also heals the wounded hearts and souls of the children in Negros Occidental as a benefactor of Kalipay Negrense Foundation, a non-profit organization that shelters disadvantaged and abused children. Her Run for Kalipay initiative has already raised $29,550, or roughly 1.6 million. Mr. President, this will go a long way towards helping provide for the needs of the children being supported by the foundation. For these reasons, Nurse Julie deserves triple recognition as a nurse, as a marathoner, and a ray of light to her fellow Negrenses. As we celebrate National Women's Month, it is high time that we recognize how Filipino women embody the pinnacle of excellence in every field of endeavor, while at the same time being our mothers, sisters, wives, grandmothers, daughters, granddaughters, and friends. We give particular appreciation to women OFWs for heroically offering their precious time and talents to foreign lands at the expense of leaving their families and loved ones. Nurse Julie represents not only Filipino nurses worldwide, but every overseas Filipino, excelling in a unique manner of engagement in their respective fields of expertise. Indeed, Nurse Julie epitomizes a woman running the world literally and figuratively, as expected of Filipinos whose blood amalgamates grit, grace, determination, consistency, and perseverance. Ang tunay pong nanalo sa marathon na ito ay ang bawat bata sa Kalipay Negrense Foundation. Ang mga medical frontliners ng ating bansa na ang isang paa ay palaging nasa hukay. At ang milyong-milyong Pilipino na katulad ni Nurse Julie ay tumatakbo rin patungo sa kani-kanilang hangarin, pangarap at tagumpay. Bago po ako magtapos, Ginoong Pangulo, gusto ko pong personal na magpasalamat kay Miss Julie dahil po sa kabila ng pagod sa katatapos lamang Tokyo Marathon noon lamang isang araw, March 5, pinilit po niyang lumipad sa Pilipinas, Ginoong Pangulo, upang makasama po tayong lahat sa araw na ito at maging panauhin nating pandangal dito sa bulwagang ito ng Senado. Muli, Ma'am Julie, isa kang simbolo ng inspirasyon para sa aming lahat. Nurse Julie, maraming salamat. Mabuhay ka at mabuhay ang dugong Pilipino.
Thank you very much. Congratulations also, Nurse Julie. Kung kami siguro yan, 3 kilometers pa lang, atake na kami sa puso. But we shall try to endeavor.
Mr. President, next to co-sponsor the measure, Mr. President, is our in-house marathoner, our dear Senator from the city of Taguig and Pateros, Senator Pia Cayetano. I move that she be recognized.
She's the only one who can do what Julie does in this chamber. our distinguished colleague from Taguig and Pateros, our in-house athlete, no other than Senator Pia Cayetano is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before I proceed, I'd like the people watching us to know that the Majority Floor Leader and the Senate President are very humble. The Majority Floor Leader is well, in the circle of basketball, UST and very well accomplished member of the Philippine Juniors national team. Juniors, right? Youth, that's what I meant, youth. And our Senate President is a world champion in Taekwondo.
Arnis,
So-
Arnis.
Arnis, sorry.
Arnis, yeah.
In
Thank you.
Arnis. And on that note, yeah, but they are very supportive of women in sports and women in politics. Mr. President, dear colleagues, I rise to co-sponsor Senate Resolution number 471, which considers Senate Resolution number 522 that I filed congratulating and commending Filipino international marathon runner Julie Oichiat, who just finished the 2023 World Marathon Challenge. I will not repeat everything that the Majority Floor Leader has already said, but I will give you the inside story that I have gathered while chatting with Julie. I think she won't mind. No? So to emphasize, and again, the Majority Floor Leader has already pointed this out, the World Marathon Challenge is 7 marathons in 7 days, okay? To be clear, if you read most marathon books, they will recommend that you only do 1 marathon a year. And then if you want to push it or your experience, they'll say, okay, maybe you can do 2, but space it out really well, have a good break, maybe 6 months apart, so on and so forth. Not in any way to compare myself with the feat that our world marathon champion here has done, but I need you to put this into context, okay? So, as you all know, the Senate President is sending me to another IPU conference in Bahrain, and every October, that conference is held in Geneva. So what I would do in my earlier years in the Senate is I would look for a marathon in Europe because I was already there. And because of that, I've ended up doing Amsterdam Marathon. No, not Paris. What did I tell you, Julie? I forgot. I did Rome, but not that. Mental block, but I've done about 10 marathons. Anyway, I've done Rome, I've done Sweden. I'm trying to recall the other, but the point of my story is, in 2 weeks, I went to New York 2 years in a row, and after the marathon in Europe, I did the New York Marathon, and that's 2 weeks break. And at that time, my doctor was not happy at all. My sports medicine doctor is like, why do you do this? It's not correct that you do this. Guys, I had 2 weeks of rest. Julie had barely 24 hours of rest every day for the next 7 days. That's the point I'm trying to emphasize, okay? It was already shocking for my sports medicine doctor to comprehend that I would do another marathon in 2 weeks. And yet here's Julie did one every day. And my question to her was, is there a special recovery tip? And I know the Senate President is listening intently because a lot of us are athletes here. And you know what she said? It's really training for what you're about to do. So it's training that way. There's no secret. We're also told, though, and I am a believer of good recovery, so you have to learn how to really take care of your body. Take care of your body. That's very important. So to go back to some stories and to show the kind of fortitude this person has. She told me, and I'll share it, Julie, that during one of the races, Madrid in particular, she fell and she got a bad wound. But imagine that she has to run in less than 24 hours again. So instead of having it stitched, which was the recommendation of the doctor, she said, I'd rather sleep and eat than have you keep me up and stitch me up. So those are the sacrifices, no, that she had to make. And in a way, you know your body well. You felt that you needed the rest more than anything else. But this is something else that I want to share, and it is the story of anyone who has been successful, I think. So my staff gave me this list of the races that she did to complete the World Marathon Challenge, and it is one race per continent. And they listed it by order of her ranking. So first place, second place, third place, fourth place. But she told me the interesting story behind that. The very first race was the one in Antarctica, where she finished fourth. If you're going to set yourself up to run 7 marathons, I would imagine, like Julie, her main goal, and I think most of the participants, is to survive. So you're not going to run out there and give it your best because you might not make it to the next 6, right? So that's what she did. She did, pacing herself, and she finished fourth. And somebody told her, "You're much faster than that. Give it your best. Go faster." So the second marathon was in Cape Town, where she finished third. Then the third marathon was in Perth, Australia, where she finished second. And then the fourth marathon was in Miami, where she finished first. And the next one was South America, where she finished first. And the next one was in Madrid, where she finished first. And the last one was in Dubai, where she finished first. So that's the story of perseverance. I mean, I'm a marathoner, and anyone who finishes a 5K, a 10K, has the right to be happy. It is an accomplishment. It's not about, I did this, you did this. It's what we choose to do for ourselves. And to do 7 marathons and to finish the last 4, number 1, is just simply amazing. And we are truly blessed to have this story that you shared with me, Julie, because it reminds us of what the human spirit is capable of. It's not just physical, but it's mental, it's emotional, it's what you choose to do, and it's what you have chosen to do. So Julie is 49, and she's accomplished all this in her late 40s. We're all told as runners that our peak is around late 30s. But clearly, either Julie would have been probably the fastest person in the world if she started earlier. But at the rate you're going, you still could be, Julie. You still could be. And I'm happy to know that she's continuing to set milestones for herself. She's continuing to set goals. I've taken the opportunity to invite her to a few marathons that are coming up, one of which is in Sydney, and which will be organized by no less than a Filipino, the ever famous Run Rio, or Rio de la Cruz. So I was hoping, Julie, that you can grace this race. He's actually also the host now of the Singapore Sundown Marathon, which is going to be held earlier. This one is in May. So the Filipinos, I'm sure, will rejoice to see you. There are runners everywhere, as you have, as Julie has herself figured out. Hindi ka na siguro wala na sigurong bansa na pwede mong puntahan na hindi ka makakahanap ng Pinoy. Pero sa dami na rin ng tumatakbong Pinoy, makakahanap ka rin ng Pinoy na tumatakbo. I actually had the wonderful opportunity of running the Twin Peak race in Hong Kong. It's a race of the 2 peaks in Hong Kong. And I ran it with ultra marathons who were Filipinos. And it's just amazing to be able to have these experiences with your kababayan. So I hope that Julie will continue to break expectations, break down barriers. It's timely that she comes here during Women's Month, because I recently said there was a World Cup Women's Trophy Tour. It was here. We celebrated that last week. This is the World Cup trophy that they bring around the world. So therefore, World Cup Women's Trophy Tour. And my message was, it's amazing to know that for the very first time, our Filipina women, our women football players are going to the World Cup. Because when we see women out there playing, doing something that is traditionally the field of men, so playing sports, playing soccer. During my time, no female played soccer. So when little girls see these Filipinas making it to the World Cup, and little boys see these Filipinas in the World Cup, it's the same way when they see Julie running all over the world, breaking barriers, finishing number one, that's when we make it very clear that women have a seat at the table. Women are equal in decision-making in the boardrooms, in the homes, in public office, in the corporate offices, everywhere and anywhere, women are equal partners. And thank you for sharing your story with us, Julie, and we wish you all the best. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, our distinguished colleague, Senator Pia Cayetano.
Thank you. Mr. President, the gentleman from Cavite, Senator Bong Revilla, would like to insert into the records his sponsorship speech.
We take note of the manifestation of the Majority Leader. And
Thank
also,
you.
I'd like to, before we act on the motion, I'd like to congratulate my Kasimanwa. We're both from Negros. We actually both help the same foundation, Kalipay Foundation. Yeah, I've been helping that since I started 2016, and I haven't stopped every month until now. It's a wonderful foundation you're helping, Julie, and they're in charge of taking care of abandoned and neglected and abused children. And what angels they are in that facility. Thank you for supporting them. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. President, and you have so many allies now here in the Senate to help the foundation. Also, we'd like to put on record, Mr. President, that the speech of our seatmate, Senator Nancy Binay, be inserted also into the records.
Yes, we take note of the manifestation.
Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move. Yeah, Mr. President.
Oh, Senator Bongo? Because
Yes,
he's
Mr.
the
President,
chairman of the sports.
the chairperson of the Committee on Sports of the Senate would also like to give his sponsorship speech.
His full support
Yes,
the speech
Mr.
on
President,
the-
I move that we recognize Senator
on the
Bongo.
win of Ma'am Julie. Senator Bongo, the distinguished gentleman from Davao and Batangas in the Republic of the Philippines is recognized.
Mr. President and distinguished colleagues, as chair of the Committee on Sports, it is with great pride and honor that I co-sponsor the Senate resolution congratulating and commending Julie Huichiat for being the first Filipina to finish the World Marathon Challenge, winning 4 of 7 marathons in its 2023 edition. Julie made history as the first Filipina to complete the World Marathon Challenge, a grueling competition where participants ran 7 marathons in 7 different countries. She did not only complete the challenge but also won 4 out of the 7 races. She placed first in the marathons in Dubai, Madrid, Fortaleza, and Miami, and secured 2nd, 3rd, and 4th positions in the marathons in Perth, Cape Town, and Novo, respectively. Your journey inspires us to believe that we can achieve our goals and dreams through hard work and dedication. Further, your efforts to generate awareness for the Kalipay Negrense Foundation, which aids mistreated and disadvantaged children in the province of Negros, serves as an example of how we can use our talents and skills to possibly impact the lives of others. As chairman of the Senate Committee on Sports, let me reiterate my steadfast commitment to our Filipino athletes in always ensuring that their rights and welfare are always at the forefront of my priorities. Makakaasa po kayo na patuloy ang pagsulong ko ng mga panukala at programa na tutulong upang mas lalo pang mapaganda ang grassroots sports program ng ating bansa at magbibigay ng suporta sa ating mga atletang Pilipino. Ang mga ganitong karangalan ay tunay nakakataba ng puso dahil sa kabila ng mga krisis na ating kinakaharap dulot ng pandemya, ang ating mga Pilipinong atleta ay namamayagpag sa mundo ng palakasan at nagbibigay ng malaking inspirasyon sa ating mga kababayan. Julie, once again, congratulations on your historic accomplishment. You have demonstrated what is possible when we put our hearts and minds into something, and we eagerly anticipate your next accomplishments. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, a distinguished colleague from Davao and Batangas, Senator Bongo.
Mr. President, the distinguished Deputy Minority Leader is seeking the floor. I move that she be recognized, Senator Risa Ontiveros.
Our distinguished Deputy Minority Floor Leader, Senator Risa Ontiveros is recognized.
Salamat kaayo, Mr. President. Just a brief manifestation, request to insert into the record my sponsorship speech. Kay Julie, damo nga salamat sa inspirasyon. Salamat kaayo, Mr.
you.
President.
Thank you very much, our Deputy Minority Floor Leader.
Yes, Mr.
Yes, it
Pre-
also happens to be Women's Month this
Yes,
month.
Mr.
So we
President.
should be honoring more women, I think, with more resolutions to the days to come.
Yeah, and it's so inspiring, Mr. President, that a lot of our colleagues would start running by tomorrow, Mr. President.
Hopefully,
Hopefully, yes.
myself
Running
included.
from their wives, Mr. President, according to the Bachelor of
But
the
wala pa nga asawa eh,
Senate,
running
Mr.
from the wife na kagad.
I wonder where he got it, Mr. President. Mr. President, as tasked by the Senate President pro tempore, I move with the permission of the body that all members of the Senate be made co-authors of this resolution.
There be
So
no
moved,
objection
Mr.
to the motion. The motion is approved. All members are co-authors.
Mr. President, at this juncture, no other member wishes to interpolate or propose any amendments to the measure. I move that we adopt proposed Senate Resolution number 471, taking into consideration proposed Senate Resolution numbers 516 and 522, subject to style. So move, Mr. President.
There being a motion to adopt proposed Senate Resolution number 471, taking consideration of Senate Resolution 516 and 522. There being no objection, the said resolutions are hereby adopted by the Philippine Senate. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. President. At this juncture, may we invite our guest, Miss Julie Ujiat, and her husband and her family to join the Senate President at the rostrum. And I ask for a minute suspension, Mr. President.
Yes, and I invite all our colleagues to join us here in the rostrum for a photo opportunity with the athlete par excellence.
Yes.
No other than Ma'am Julie. Session suspended for 1 minute.
Resume.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the additional reference of business. So move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, we proceed to the additional reference of business. The secretary is directed to read.
Additional reference of business bill on first reading, Senate number 1965, restructuring the PNP, amending for the purpose sections 25, 26, 29, 30, 31, 35, 36, and 67 of RA 6975, and appropriating funds therefore. Senator Ejercito.
Refer to the Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs, Local Government and Finance.
Committee reports. Committee report number 36 by the Committee on Local Government on House number 3974, introduced by Representative Tan, declaring August 11 of every year a special non-working holiday in the province of Samar to be known as Samar Day in commemoration of its foundation anniversary. Recommending its approval without amendment, taking into consideration Senate number 1835, sponsor Senator Ejercito.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee Report 37 by the Committee on Local Government on House number 3971, introduced by Representative Ortega, declaring March 2 of every year special non-working holiday in the province of La Union to be known as La Union Day in commemoration of its founding anniversary, recommending its approval without amendment, taking into consideration Senate number 1834, sponsor Senator Ejercito.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee Report 38 by the Committee on Public Services, Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation and Finance on Senate number 1121, introduced by Senator Poe, creating a Philippine Transportation Safety Board, prescribing its powers and functions and appropriating funds thereof, recommending its approval without amendment, sponsor Senator Poe.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee Report 39, submitted by the Committee on Public Services on proposed Senate Resolution numbers 390 by Senator Villanueva, 391 by Senator Revilla Jr., 392 by Senator Estrada, 400 by Senator Ejercito, 401 by Senator Ontiveros, 402 by Senator Binay, 403 by Senator Pimentel III, 418 by Senator Legarda, 421 by Senator Gatchalian, recommending the adoption of the recommendations contained therein and their immediate implementation. Sponsor Senator Poe.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee Report 40, prepared and submitted jointly by the Committees on Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation, Basic Education, Ways and Means, and Finance on Senate number 1964, with Senators Revilla Jr., Padilla, Angara, Go, Estrada, Villanueva, Villar M., De La Rosa, and Gatchalian as authors thereof, entitled An Act Institutionalizing the Grant of a Teaching Supplies Allowance for Public School Teachers and Appropriating Funds therefore, recommending its approval in substitution of Senate numbers 2294, 677, 1045, 1729, and 1831. Sponsor Senator Revilla Jr.
To the calendar for ordinary business. Majority Leader.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. President, at this juncture, I move that we transfer from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders, Committee Report number 38 on Senate Bill number 1121. This is the Philippine Transportation Safety Board Act. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there an objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move that we consider Senate Bill number 1121 under Committee Report number 38.
Is there any objection? There being none, the motion is approved. Consideration of Senate Bill number 1121 is now in order. With the permission of the body, the Secretary will read only the title of the bill without prejudice to inserting into the record the whole text thereof.
An act creating a Philippine Transportation Safety Board, prescribing its powers and functions and appropriating funds therefore.
Mr. President, to sponsor the measure, may we recognize Senator Grace Poe, Chairperson of the Committee on Public Services, to deliver the sponsorship speech.
The Chairman of the Committee on Public Services, Senator Grace Poe, is recognized.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. I would like to thank our very generous colleague, our pro temp, Senator Lauren Legarda, for giving me this opportunity to deliver my sponsorship speech ahead of hers, Mr. President, and also our Majority Leader. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, further to the committee report on the January 1, 2023 NAIA air traffic glitch, I am honored to present again for this body's consideration the Philippine Transport Safety Board Act. Hindi lingid sa kalaman ng lahat na ang measure na ito ay na-veto noong unang bahagi ng 19th Congress on the ground of duplication of functions. But the Senate and the House of Representatives of the 18th Congress saw no duplication, only the need to institute an independent agency with the proper expertise to investigate transportation accidents as per global standards. Of course, DOTR, Marina, PNP, and all those other agencies can investigate these transportation accidents or incidents. But much like what we saw during the New Year fiasco at the airport, CAAP will never say that they were remiss with their maintenance. When a ship sinks, Marina will never say that they failed to conduct the proper inspection. And when a fatal train occurs, DOTR will never admit that they bought a malfunctioning train or that corners were cut during construction. Currently, CAAP functions as a regulator, operator, and investigator. Even CAAP recognizes the disadvantages of these conflicting roles and supports any proposal to separate these functions. Congress had to step in because CAAP couldn't even figure out what went wrong. This is exactly what we need. Why we need the PTSB. We need an independent agency that shall conduct independent, thorough, and truthful investigations and provide corresponding and critical recommendations. Para isang lupon ng eksperto ang mag-iimbestiga at hindi ang paiba-ibang resource persons sa Kongreso. I have said this before and I will say it again. The PTSB can save lives, and not just that, it is also hope that it can resolve the issues in our transport systems without even causing a shutdown. The enactment of this measure will be the first step towards safer and more effective journeys for all Filipinos. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Grace Poe, Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before I make a proper motion or before we suspend consideration, let me just state for the record, Mr. President, that this representation is very interested and fully support this particular measure. And at this juncture, with the permission of our dear colleague, Senator Grace Poe, that this representation be co-author, co-sponsor, Mr. President, of this measure. With her permission, Mr. President. Thank you. Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 1121 under Committee Report number 38. So move, Mr. President.
Is there an objection? There being none, consideration of Senate Bill number 1121 under Committee Report number 35 is hereby suspended.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, before we proceed, let me just acknowledge our guest from the gallery, the Presidential Advisor, the Office of Muslim Affairs, Sir Almarim Sentitila. We welcome him in the Senate. Thank you, sir.
Welcome to the Senate, Secretary Altila.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, this juncture, I move that we transfer from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders committee report number 39. This pertains to the air traffic management system glitch at Ninoy Aquino International Airport.
Is there an objection? There being none, so transferred.
Mr. President, I move that we consider proposed Senate resolution numbers 390, 391, 392, 400, 401, 402, 403, 418, and 421 under committee report number 39.
Is there an objection? There being none, the motion is approved. Consideration of proposed Senate resolutions are now in order. With the permission of the body, the Secretary will read only the title of the resolutions. Sorry, committee report. Is there an objection? There being none, motion is approved. The Secretary is directed to read.
The air traffic management system glitch at the Ninoy Aquino International Airport, NAIA.
Thank you, Mr.
Majority
President. Mr. President, to sponsor the measure, may we recognize Senator Grace Poe, Chairperson of the Committee on Public Services, to deliver the sponsorship speech.
Our Chair of the Committee on Public Services, Senator Grace Poe, is again recognized.
Mr. President, dear colleagues, good afternoon again. Matapos ang 2 buwan ng trabaho at masusing pag-aaral, a public hearing, an ocular and walkthrough, a technical inspection with an independent audit team, and a series of meetings and consultations with agencies and experts, we have finally identified the cause of the glitch of the New Year's Day air traffic shutdown. I'd like to thank those that joined us during the tour of CAAP, our Majority Leader, as well as our Senate President, and also Senator Risa for joining us that day. The process is no joke, Mr. President. Para tayong nag-crash course sa electrical engineering at air traffic management system. Thus, I want to take this opportunity to thank the Institute of Integrated Electrical Engineers of the Philippines for accepting the committee's invitation to be our independent audit and for helping us examine the technical aspect of the investigation. It is my hope that all our hard work pays off at hindi na ito mangyayari muli sa hinaharap. Nagsimula ang investigasyon in a confused note when even CAAP was unable to determine the cause of the glitch. Allow me to walk everybody through why our country's main airport shut down as I present to the body the findings of the Committee on Public Services. First, there was indeed a power outage pero hindi dahil sa supply ng Meralco but because of several equipment malfunctioning prior to and during the incident. Lahat tayo nalito sa paiba-ibang narrative ng CAAP pero sa huli lumabas din na maraming equipment na ang may problema. Una ay ang uninterruptible power supply or the UPS which actually only de-energized as a safety measure para hindi maapektuhan ang buong sistema. Pangalawang problema ay ang circuit breaker. Nagkaroon ng loose connection ang neutral wire ng breaker kaya imbis na 220 volts ay 380 volts ang nailabas nito. The overvoltage led to the damage of the communications and navigation equipment or the CNS ATM system na siyang nagpatagal ng shutdown. Pangatlong problema ay ang automatic voltage regulator. Meron nga tayo nito sa bahay natin, pero gumagana. Nung August 2022 pa lang, 4 na buwan na pala, bagong insidente, CAAP claimed that the AVR is only used when the UPS is under maintenance, but separate reports of the interagency investigation team and the independent audit team said that the AVR is considered critical in the overall safety design of the system. Ang kawalan ng AVR ay kawalan din ng proteksyon para sa UPS mula sa fluctuation ng kuryente. So, ilang buwan na pa lang hindi gumagana ang AVR nila. Mr. President, if you remember during our ocular CAAP, they committed to have the AVR repaired on February 9. But according to the interagency report, the procurement of a new AVR is still underway. Wala pa rin. Second, the malfunctioning of these three equipments was worsened by several underlying issues that all aligned on New Year's Day and ultimately led to a system failure. Kung baga sa sakit, may underlying medical condition na ang pasyente at nagkaroon na ng maraming komplikasyon, kaya nangyari ito. Kabilang sa mga underlying issues ay ang kawalan ng engineering standards at guidelines para sa maintenance at troubleshooting ng mga equipment. Nakumpirma din na wala pang system evaluation para sa buong system at wala pa rin compliance ang CAAP sa energy audit na requirement sa ilalim ng RA 11825 or the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act. There is also no proper personnel training and a glaring lack of electrical engineers. Sumitomo, the third-party maintenance provider, also never got the chance to continue providing technical assistance due to a pending dispute with DOTR. To illustrate, kung baga, sa ospital ay may kakulangan sa mga espesyalistang doktor. Meron mang mga nurses ay hindi naman sila trained para mag-alaga o magbigay lunas sa pasyenteng may specific na karamdaman o kailangan magpa-opera. Third, there's no functioning backup or redundancy, which is why a single fault in the equipment can and did cause a shutdown. May mga naging proposals pero hanggang ngayon ay wala pa ring naisa sa katuparan. Nevertheless, CAAP reported that they are now expediting the construction of another CNS ATM facility, which will be the main facility while the existing facility will be designated as a backup. In the interim, CAAP has a budget request of 1.34 billion pesos for the upgrading and replacement of a few critical equipment. NEDA also approved recently the utilization of the JICA loan balance for the procurement of upgrades, spare parts, and a third-party maintenance service provider. Fourth, we are able to rule out sabotage and cyber attack. Bagamat maraming kakulangan ng seguridad ng pasilidad gaya ng kawalan ng CCTV at ng mismong sistema gaya ng outdated na computer system at iba pang cyber security vulnerabilities, walang data compromise na nangyari dahil sa insidente. However, A conclusive finding negating the cyber attack potential will depend on the UPS data logs sent to Turkey for examination, which the committee will monitor and report to the body once the results are out. Fifth, CAAP's poor compliance with the audit observations of the International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO, contributed to the failure of the system. Hindi na nakapagtakang bagsak tayo sa air navigation services category, scoring only 45.8%, 28%. 45.28%, while the global average is 65%. One significant ICAO observation is the country's lack of a master contingency plan that should have established an emergency procedure for events like this. Mr. President, as early as 2017, even before the CNS ATM system was completed, CAAP was already well aware of the need for this plan dahil nag-create na ito ng TWG pero hanggang ngayon ay nananatiling isang working draft and contingency plan natin. The Philippines already has a history of non-compliance to ICAO, and I wish to reiterate that there are consequences. A downgrade from Category 1 to Category 2 means Philippine registered aircraft and personnel would have to undergo heightened inspections abroad, which might cause flight delays. Maaari rin mag-impose ang ibang bansa ng restrictions sa ating mga commercial flights. This will translate to huge economic losses for our country. And lastly, the efficiency and transparency of CAAP are being limited by its own charter. Currently, CAAP functions as a regulator, operator, and investigator. Even CAAP recognizes the disadvantages of these conflicting roles and supports any proposal to separate these functions. Nawawala din ang fiscal autonomy ng CAAP dahil pinag-remit ito ng gobyerno na umaabot ng 22.4 billion simula 2016 na dapat sana ay nagamit para sa equipment upgrades. But it is worth stressing that Section 16 of its charter gives CAAP fiscal autonomy. Further, a 2016 DOJ opinion expressly stated that CAAP is a GOCC exempted from the coverage of the dividend law and is not obliged to remit dividends. CAAP also has been expressing employee recruitment and retention issues due to limitations set by existing laws. The salary standardization law prevents the agency from providing competitive salaries to critical manpower like air traffic controllers. We are being beaten by foreign recruiters with offers of higher pay and huge relocation allowances. Karamihan din sa CAAP employees ay nananatiling job order. Madami pa ring temporary workers sa ahensya, kabilang ng mga maraming technical personnel noong nangyari ang insidente. Many of them were actually contractual workers. Some were even outsourced from a manpower company. Mr. President, when I began the investigation of this matter, I stressed that the committee will adopt a non-punitive direction because of our primary goal right now is public safety. Accountability will follow after we've laid down safety measures for our air passengers. The committee thus submits a long list of recommendations as a form of corrective and preventive action to the deficiencies and inefficiencies in the procedures and protocols of CAAP. To improve the technical capacity of CAAP, we recommend the urgent replacement and upgrading of critical equipment. To complement this, sufficient engineering guidelines and training of accredited engineers should be rolled out. Another CNS ATM system in an independent location should also be supported. To address other non-technical aspects, hinihiling ko ang suporta ng ating mga kapwa-senador para maipasa ang Philippine Transportation Safety Board at ang Philippine Airports Authority Act at ang pag-amyenda ng CAAP Charter at ang pagpasa ng isang Air Passenger Bill of Rights para naman sa ating mga mananakay. Related to these, the committee is also recommending that the DOTR fast-track the feasibility studies on the proposed NAIA privatization and assist CAAP in immediately complying with the ICAO recommendations. Mr. President, it should be recognized that the CNS ATM was a project spanning several administrations and changes of heads since its inception in 1997. Hinawakan ito ng 6 na presidente, 11 DOTR at DOTC secretaries, 8 CAAP directors, 4 na assistant secretaries ng dating Air Transportation Office or ATO, and many batches of poorly equipped engineers under them. The committee believes that CAAP personnel on the ground did their best with the equipment, guidelines, and training given to them. We thus defer to the current administration of CAAP to undertake the administrative investigation for disciplinary action on the culpability of any of its personnel. The January 1 system failure was indeed a confluence of factors and errors. Experts likened it to the planets aligning, albeit with an unfortunate consequence. Bihira pero alam nating posibleng mangyari ito at patuloy na mangyayari kung wala tayong gagawin sa mga problema ng air traffic system sa bansa. Mr. President, there's much work needed for a better system. It is my earnest hope that through our investigative work, Congress will be able to assist CAAP in providing a system where travel in our airspace is no longer shut down by causes which could have been avoided. With that, Mr. President, I urge the body to support and adopt the recommendations on this committee report and its immediate implementation to prevent an incident like this from happening in the future and towards safer air travel for all. Again, thank you to my colleagues for allowing me to deliver this speech, particularly Senator Lauren and our Majority Leader. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Grace po. Majority Leader.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. President, I would just like to put on record, as my name was mentioned by our dear colleague, that we thank and sincerely congratulate our chairperson of the Committee on Public Services. To come up with this report is indeed a gargantuan task, and we would like to put on record our full support, especially with what she mentioned about the report. If you recall, Mr. President, during the committee hearings, this representation asked several times if indeed
the answers to whatever.
if there were maintenance na ginawa noong mga time po na yun, ay maaaring hindi nangyari itong system glitch nito. At ang naging sagot ng ating CAAP ay opo, and in the affirmative, Mr. President. Mr. President, we'd also like to put on record that during the hearing, yung AVR po hindi na pala gumagana since August 2022. And when we were there together with the presiding officer, Senator JV, Senator Risa, of course, our chairperson, Senator Grace, and our Senate President Mig Subiri with Senator Tulfo. During the time, Mr. President, we were so surprised that during the time it's not even working, and they have the gall to show it to us that it's there and it's not working. And to my surprise, until now pala, Mr. President, ay hindi pa rin nakakabili, Mr. President. Again, let me put my full support to the report.
So is that 100% support?
Yes, Mr. President. And that is why I'm giving my full support to our distinguished chairperson. And she is right to say, mahirap po na yung CAAP regulator na, operator pa, at investigator pa. E paano nyo pong may imbestigahan yung inyong sarili, paano nyo makakakuha o makakagawa ng totoong solusyon doon sa mga nangyaring problema, because there's clearly conflict of interest. And last but not the least, Mr. President, this is so alarming, and we've raised this also during the hearing, yung pong job order, yung pong contract of service, yung JO workers are higher than the number of regular workers. In 2021, 59.8% ay job order at contract of service workers. Noong 2020, 57%, 56%. So sa halip na bumaba po, pataas ng pataas, yung job order at contract of service. So it's really a concern, and we thank the chairperson for emphasizing that particular issue. So with that, Mr. President, and for our colleagues to study further the committee report, I move that we suspend consideration of committee report number 39. So move, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I'd just like to put on record that Senator JV was also with us in the inspection. Did I? And also Senator Rafi Tulfo. Yeah, thank you. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Is there an objection? There being none, consideration of committee report number 39 is hereby suspended. Majority Leader.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. President, this juncture, and with the permission of the body, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 1841 under Committee Report number 21. This is the strengthening the conservation and protection of Philippine cultural heritage.
Is there an objection? There being none, resumption of consideration of Senate Bill number 1841 under Committee Report number 21 is now in order.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. May I ask for a minute suspension, Mr. President?
Session suspended.
Yes, Mr. President. Thank you. We are now in consideration of Senate Bill number 1841 under Committee Report number 21.
Yes,
Mr.
please.
President, the parliamentary status of the measure is that we have sponsored the measure, and at this juncture, I now move that we open the period of interpellations and debate and recognize the sponsor, the distinguished Senate President pro tempore, Senator Lauren Ligarda, and to interpellate our Minority Leader, Senator Coco Pimentel.
There being no objection to the motion of the majority floor leader, Senator Lauren Legarda is recognized to sponsor the measure and to interpolate our minority floor leader, Senator Aquilino Coco Pimentel III.
Thank you, Mr. President, with the permission of our knowledgeable, experienced, and hardworking pro temp, who is also the sponsor. If I can ask you just some clarificatory questions, actually, Mr. President, because the default position of this representation is to support a bill which will enhance our knowledge about our own culture.
Yes.
But what is important is we understand what measure we are passing, Mr. President. So,
Yes, Mr. President, I will of course yield to the expert who is the principal sponsor of the new law on the Creative Industries Act. When this representation was Congressman, I was a member of the House block called Achieve, the Creative Block, and he, as trade chair, had sponsored and I understand introduced important provisions that enhanced the Creative Industries Law. In fact, we just were together in the launch by the DTI of that law, and yes, we will work together. So I truly appreciate, I'm looking forward to your interpellations, which I'm sure are only meant to enhance the proposed measure.
yes, Mr. President, that is correct. Now, just to help us in understanding the measure under consideration, what is the main purpose of our measure, Mr. President? Is it to introduce the concept of cultural mapping, or is it to comprehensively amend an existing law, Mr. President?
Thank you for your question, Mr. President. Senate Bill 1841 is an act strengthening the conservation and protection of our national cultural heritage through an enhanced cultural policy, heritage education, and culture mapping program, and it amends Republic Act 166 or the 2009 National Cultural Heritage Act. So this fundamentally includes the idea and the concept of cultural mapping into the 2009 law. So it's been 13 years. And there are also two provisions, Mr. President, which are not clearly stipulated in the National Cultural Heritage Act. And these are the sightline, which we discussed earlier. And second, the participation of LGUs in designating cultural sites, Mr. President.
So, yes, Mr. President. So if the main purpose of the measure is to start cultural mapping or to enhance our existing cultural mapping efforts, directing the LGUs to start the process would be germane, related to the subject matter of the bill. That I understand that, I get that clearly. But this new idea of protecting the like visual impact or the visual sight line, can we say that this is necessarily connected to the effort to enhance our mapping of cultural properties, Mr. President?
It's somewhere here. Yes, Mr. President. Sightlines are an important part of cultural mapping activities because monuments and sites cannot be separated from the context wherein they are located. Government cultural agencies determine which grade 1 properties should have protected sightlines and what the extent of the sightlines are. And not all declared properties will have protected sightlines. This will be reserved for the most significant ones. So sightlines hopefully will be included so that this concept will also be downloaded to LGUs so that the problems of people building large structures beside our historical monuments will not be a problem anymore. It's a perennial problem, Mr. President.
Yes, no, it's not.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Cayetano is recognized.
Just listening to the discussion on the floor, and I'd like to remind the body of the Torre de Manila
Yes.
issue. This is the Rizal Monument in Luneta, and the issue here was there was a building built. Actually, it's not near. If you see it, it's, I don't know, is it a kilometer? I
But
don't
it's a
even
site-
remember. No, but my point is it's not beside it. So the argument of the builder is ang layo nito eh. But the argument of the heritage experts and us heritage advocates is, no, it's in the sightline. And it is a fact. It is a visual eyesore. You can now never ever take a photo of the Rizal Monument in front and not see that building.
I am
For
glad
you
that
to
Your Honor mentioned that.
For
Yes,
you to
but
hide that building, you will now have to angle.
you'll have to Photoshop.
Yeah,
Picture.
or you can take a side picture. You can Photoshop or you can take a side picture. So it ruined the sightline. So I support this provision because we defended it all the way to the Supreme Court. And it is high time that we make it clearer so this does not happen anymore all over the country. So I
Thank
just
you
wanted
so-
to put that for the record.
Thank you for that, Mr. President. I thank Senator Cayetano because she was very vigilant on that issue. In fact, I was just about to state the Supreme Court decision, which was you were present there during the time, and this was like 13 years ago. In the Supreme Court decision, Mr. President, the Supreme Court stated that there was no provision in the law at the time for the protection of sightlines. And that's the reason why I'm including it now in the law so that the Torre issue would not hopefully happen again. And this Torre de Manila issue should not be replicated. So this amendment, Mr. President, addresses this gap or deficiency by including sightlines in cultural mapping requirements, particularly grade 1 properties determined by government cultural agencies to be of highest significance to the nation. And Your Honor is correct that the Torre de Manila is a prime example of it can't be a violation because the Supreme Court said there was no law. That is the reason, Mr. President, why this representation decided to include with the consultation, of course, with the experts here before me, on the importance
And
of
if I
this.
may,
Yes.
that was designated as the Pambansang photo bomber.
Yes.
Now it's just this is
Yes.
destroyed the whole background.
Is it the pambansang photo bomber a person, Mr. President?
Well, in
It's a
this case,
building.
it's a building.
It's a building.
Pambansang photo bomber.
Yes. So if I may also add for the record, and again, for the benefit of Senator Cayetano, this provision in our amendment to the law fills that gap, at the same time requires the cultural agencies to define in the declaration and conservation management plan the breadth of the visual impact and core buffer zones. So we're not specifying, you're correct, a particular distance or coverage, since visual sightlines and core buffer zones will depend on the varying considerations such as the designated viewing point, the location and size of the complex, and other similar matters.
Thank you, Mr. President. So actually, I'm raising this issue not to debate on the substance of whether visual impact or visual line, visual sightline, a sightline would be should be granted as a new protection for important cultural properties. The point of my question is, are we consciously now expanding the subject matter or subject matters in the bill to go beyond cultural mapping, but also mentioning additional protection for important cultural properties. And in some other parts of the measure, I think an additional power for the commission. So, but if we are consciously doing that and only one law, RA 10066 is involved, we can do it, but we will have to adjust or amend the title because the title gives us the impression that it's really, the title is Strengthening the Conservation and Protection of Philippine Cultural Heritage Through Cultural Mapping. So this is more than, this is about more than just cultural mapping. Is that correct, Mr. President?
Yes and no, Mr. President, if I may. Yes, because sightlines are part of cultural mapping, Mr. President. Mapping and the preservation go hand in hand, and mapping, of course, is a tool of preservation. When we do cultural mapping, we include what is seen, what is present in the core and buffer zones. Now, when we do the cultural mapping, let's say, of the city of Manila with the Rizal Monument, we would have to include the Torre, which is the Pambansang photo bomber, and that would change the cultural mapping. But you are correct. In the initial stage, when I filed this in the House, when it was passed on third reading, it simply was to designate or mandate or capacitate LGUs for culture mapping. But in further discussions with the NCCA, now a senator, I realized that we cannot do without these sightlines because there are many threats to our historical monuments. And Torre is just one example, but in 80 provinces and 1,600 cities and municipalities, we could lose, and this will actually avoid problems if it is clear in the amendments of the law. So let me just state, Mr. President, that it is part of culture mapping, but it is now an additional provision, if I may say, compared to the first bill I filed as congressman in my culture mapping bill.
Oh, with that answer, Mr. President, can we say that because there is a section on definition of terms, and we're introducing as a new paragraph O, definition of cultural mapping. Does that capture the explanation given to us, Mr. President, that visual sightline or visual impact is part of cultural mapping? Because when I read it, I don't get that impression. And actually, visual sightline is another term which is defined.
Mr. President, the visual sightline, of course, can be defined. And while we already have the definition of what cultural mapping is, I would be happy to receive your enlightened amendment, if any, in the period of individual amendments to expand it. But I would answer it this way, that sightlines will be part of cultural mapping because core and buffer zones would be part and parcel of what we are mapping.
Okay, so yes, Mr. President. So maybe at the end of the interpellation and the amendment process, then we revisit the title to capture.
Yes.
Yes, to
Yes,
capture
Mr. President.
the result.
Yes, sir.
Mr. President. So
And let me just add, Mr. President, that sightlines are part of the identification and significance of a historical monument. For example, a student does a cultural mapping of the Rizal Monument today. Assuming they compare the cultural mapping of 20 years ago, it would be different because the culture mapping of 20 years ago would be a different Rizal Monument without a torre at the back, but the culture mapping of today would have the torre. So it would be different. And so I would say that anything that has physically changed will include the culture mapping. But you're correct, we will have to maybe innovate or change the title a little so that it is clearly understood that we are adding that provision for protection.
or if the sponsor will agree that it's clearly understood that this is more than just cultural mapping.
The experts have told me, Mr. President, that sightlines are part and parcel of cultural mapping. However, this could go both ways in terms of interpretation. Sightlines would be part of cultural mapping, right? Yes. The Secretary General of UNACOM, Dr. Ivan Enares, and the NCCA chair they've stated that the sightlines are part and parcel of cultural mapping. Is that correct? Yes, they would say that it is part of cultural mapping.
Mr. President, if we could go into layman's understanding of what is cultural mapping. Is it, as there is the Rizal Monument in Luneta Park, that is reported as a culturally significant monument or property. So isn't that
Yes.
already cultural mapping? Because if we need to go into visual sightline or visual impact, then the next questions would be how many meters or kilometers radius will be under the protection of this new protection that we're introducing called visual sightline, Mr.
Yes,
President?
Mr. President. Let me identify or define culture mapping because it's quite broad. Culture mapping is defined as an approach used to identify, record, and use cultural resources and activities for building communities where communities map what is important to them. It identifies distinct cultural resources. It generates interest on heritage resources among users and non-users of cultural properties. The establishment of heritage conservation councils that lead in the conservation of the local cultural heritage. It understands basic frameworks. So it's quite broad. And culture mapping would include both tangible and intangible heritage, Mr. President. In
Yes,
fact,
yes.
if I were
Yes.
to map, let's say Rizal Monument today, it would include Senator Pia Cayetano and her attending the Supreme Court hearings at the time and the Supreme Court decision on sightlines. Parti po yan ng culture mapping because culture mapping, Mr. President, is not just on built immovable heritage. It would also include movable heritage. It would also include stories, articles, and intangible heritage that transpired within a certain time. So all stories, news, protests, arguments at the time would be included in the culture mapping. So it identifies sites, cultural sites, historical sites. It identifies perhaps biodiversity in the area. It identifies photobombers in the persons or buildings. It would list also stories, anecdotes of people who were for it and against it. So, ang lawak po. So the context of the monument is just part of the mapping exercise, but it would cover everything and all that transpired with the monument at the center. So that would be part, I think, of the intangible heritage story as part of culture mapping of Rizal Monument.
Okay, so as I get from the response, Mr. President, culture mapping is not only about what that cultural property is, where it is located, or its description, but includes some
context.
historical events
Tama po.
which we can say is connected or had
Yes.
or had an impact on the
Yes.
on that cultural property.
Yes, Mr. President, you got it. It would have historical events, current events. It would have all stories. It could even have lovers' tales. Mr. President, Rizal Monument and Luneta. You know, it would have the trees I planted there as Luntiang Pilipinas. It would have the story of the Chinese garden. It would have the stories of lovers who broke up in that area or lovers who fell in love in that area. It would have a story of Bagumbayan. So it would have history. It would have Ang dami.
Yeah.
Culture mapping would cover everything. Our history as a people and anecdotal stories of what that monument has been a witness to.
So, as I understand it, Mr. President, this process we call culture mapping, which we want to start or be initiated at the LGU level, will end all the way up to the NCAA's, to a Philippine registry on cultural properties, which is under the management and custody of the NCCA. Is that correct?
Recap, no? Yes.
And that database would contain all of those mentioned by our sponsor. All of
Yes, Mr. President, the pre-cap is already existing, ideally. But actually, the LGUs can keep it and should keep it and should pass it on from generation to generation. For example, Mr. President, I have 21 hard copy volumes of Kinaraya culture mapping we did in 3 years with the DepEd teachers of Antique doing it during pandemic. At saka hindi pa po ito sapat. And so we will submit that to the NCCA as part of their registry. This is just for one province. But I would say, even if it's 21 volumes lying in my office, it's not even enough because there's so much to research and to learn about. The Philippine Registry of Cultural Property, they call the PRECAP. It's a central repository of all information pertaining to cultural properties in the Philippines deemed significant to our cultural heritage. And this is, as I said, it would have built heritage, immovable heritage, movable, that's tangible, and intangible heritage. It would have songs, rituals, medicines, dances, agricultural knowledge, agroforestry. It would have culinary heritage. It would have ang dami-dami po. So we will discover the vast richness of our nation, of our people, Mr. President.
Yes, under our existing procedure or processes, Mr. President, in coming up with and maintaining the pre-cap, is the LGU already involved currently?
Yes, there are LGUs that have, in fact, I have here the list of LGUs who already have, like Binyan has their culture mapping. There are, and there are those who are willing to do it. So there are many LGUs. How many do we have? It's here in my notes.
Yes, ma'am. Basta they are involved now.
Of course, yeah. The national, let me say it,
yes.
the pre-cap and the national government and the NCCA cannot do it. That's why kailangan pong LGU. The more local we are, the better. What we need to do is to capacitate them. 277 LGUs, but ang daming may gusto. But they need to understand, they need to be taught and be given the toolkits. They need capacity building. You know, this is so exciting. It's going to be a whole of government approach, but the more local you are, the more interesting. And we will discover many stones and monuments, maybe underground cities. We will discover the city below Taal Lake, because there was a city there before volcanic eruptions of centuries past. So marami pong matutuklasan. And this is precisely because of the importance of cultural properties that is worked on and determined by the people. And this would form part of the statement of significance of a property. Hindi lang po yung nakita magandang monumento, let's map this, okay, ito address niya, ito location niya, itong tayo niya, itong height niya, yun na yun. Hindi po. Built heritage pala po yun. Yung immovable. Paano na yung mga halaman kaya nung lumang panahon? Wala na yung bulaklak na yon. Sayang. Paano maitatanim yung bulaklak na yon na doon lang natutuklasan sa lugar na yon? Maraming kwento. Sino nagdala ng bulaklak na yon doon? Sino nagtanim? Bakit nawala? Binomba ba? Pinatay ba? O sahihip ba ng hangin? Nagbago ba? So there's so much to research. So it will not just be the monument, Mr. President.
But in the example given, Mr. President, the monument plus that flower or plant are two distinct cultural properties. From the example given, Mr. President.
Mr.
If I
President.
understand correctly what
Okay.
the measure
Let-
we are
let me
talking
state
about.
this.
Mr. President.
Mr. President, we could culture map everything and anything. We could culture map, let's say, a building, the Senate building, and all the stories and whatever is in it. We could also culture map a city, a municipality, or a barangay. We could culture map a family and its lineage. We could culture map a province or a region. So everything and anything. I did cultural mapping of a province, and that included the tangible and intangible heritage of my province. We could culture map anything possible, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. President, that's why I'm asking, under existing law, we already have this system of culture mapping, and we're expecting LGUs to participate. If I may be educated, at what level of the LGU is participation expected, Mr. President? Kasi apat na klaseng LGU yan eh. We have the provinces, cities, municipalities, or barangays. Currently, because we'll compare it with the measure, what is the new concept being introduced by the measure, Mr.
Yes,
President?
Mr. President. Provinces, cities, and municipalities. But in doing culture mapping, we involve, at least what we did, the DepEd teachers. We would have to talk to the barangays. We would have to talk to people's organizations. We would have to talk to indigenous peoples. We would have to talk to our sakadas. We would have to talk to our farmers. So we research, we talk to everybody. But in terms of organization who can access it, it could be province, city, and municipality. But
Yes.
nothing would stop a barangay for
Yes,
wanting to be culturally mapped. Wouldn't it be interesting to find out what is the first barangay established in the Philippines? Right?
They could add that fact to their culture mapping report. Yes, but okay. What new obligation are we now imposing on LGUs under the Senate bill that the committee report that we are discussing, Mr. President?
They will be trained. They will be given the toolkits. Give me the page where the LGUs, it's here. The inventory of LGUs is, it's already mandatory. Actually, it's already mandatory
now.
in terms of inventory. But what we did in RA 166, we called it inventory. It was not called cultural mapping then. At that time, we cursorily went through it and said that we will do gathering of data. But here, in the proposed measure, Mr. President, because natuto po tayo, maraming natutunan in 13 years, dinidetalya po natin yung cultural mapping. At ito nga po yung binanggit ko, it could be both tangible and intangible heritage. It could be the preservation of data, cultural mapping by local government units. They're mandated to conduct a comprehensive cultural mapping of the areas of their jurisdiction. They shall mobilize and establish partnerships with concerned government agencies to ensure the prompt and effective implementation of the provision. They may seek assistance from NGOs, cultural organizations, etc.
We are using the word mandatory, but is there in the measure a sanction?
Wala po.
Wala, but
No,
we're using the word mandatory. So, actually, kung ganun po kasi sitwasyon,
We will not do sanctions.
I do not know how. So we will have to improve compliance through persuasion
Yes.
or
And I told
inspiration.
that
Sharing
sounds
the
better.
excitement
Yes.
displayed by our sponsor, Mr. President,
Mr.
on
President,
the subject matter.
yes,
Dapat
perhaps,
ganun eh.
tama po kayo. Just like the LCCAP in the Climate Change Act, the Local Climate Change Action Plan, it was mandated way back in 2009. Maybe 50% of LGUs have the LCCAP. So yes, I'm sure they will be interested. Ang dami pong interesado talaga. You know, the Giwan Samar mayor is a lady. Ano pangalan niya? Si Kwan? Oo. Ha? Kina. Kwan. Nung nangyari po ang Yolanda, ang storya sa akin, ang una niyang ginawa nung paglanding ng Yolanda sa Giwan, kinuha niya ang kanyang output ng culture mapping sa Giwan, sinave niya. Di ba touching?
Tama, kasi pinaghirapan po yun.
Pinaghirapan.
Oh,
At saka
pinaghirapan
yung
po yan.
storya.
Definitely.
Storya ng kanyang bayan.
Opo. So yun po ang bago, no? Yung concept that we're making it mandatory, and we're changing the concept from inventory to cultural mapping as far as LGUs are concerned. And
Yes.
the same, the LGUs expected to participate in the program are provinces, cities, and municipalities.
Yes. I'm happy to inform Your Honor that the DILG has been enlightened, and they've included this in their seal of good local governance requirements, culture mapping. Ahead
Good. So,
of us enacting the law, sinama nila. So, ibig sabihin siguro, yung mga nanalo ng seal of local governance ay meron silang culture mapping. Kasi 277 LGUs na ang meron po na culture mapping maski walang batas. In fact, gumawa na rin ako sa probinsya ko. Sabi ko, intayin ko pa batas. Kung di ko mapasa, at least meron na ako. I want to do part 2 and enhance it. And really, the teachers are so excited. And they're grateful. They learn more about themselves, their province. They have the skills. It would be so interesting to engage DepEd in this. It would be so interesting to even have culture guides, history guides, di ba? Are you as excited as I am, Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. President.
What kind? Yes.
I just sound this way, Mr. President, but I'm really excited. Excited enough, together with my staff, that we want to study this all the more, Mr.
Yes.
President. So
Sure.
we need more time to really go deeper into the other aspects of this measure, Mr. President. The one thing we observe, Mr. President, is that there is also there's also a new categorization or categories, di ba? From the existing law, I think, recognizes 6 categories of cultural properties. And we're introducing this grade 1, grade 2, grade 3 concept, Mr. President. So isn't this another example that we went beyond the cultural mapping, Mr.
The
President?
grades are already in the RA, no? The grades are already in the existing National Heritage Law, Mr. President. The
It's
grades, the grading system are in the implementing rules and regulations
Correct.
of the 13-year-old law. But this grading system that it's clarifying, explaining the IRR of the existing law. The grading system, Mr. President, rationalizes the levels of significance of properties included in the Philippine Registry of Cultural Property. Level 1 are the properties most significant to the nation. Grade 2 are also nationally significant but of lesser value than grade 1. Grade 3 properties include the rest of properties in the pre-cap, such as those determined by LGUs to be significant to the province, city, or municipality through local ordinances. And this grade 3 is the one I am informed that is not part of the RA 166, and this is vital in cultural mapping. So, in short, meron po tayong mga statwa, monumento, mga puno, mga gusali na hindi po nakasama sa IRR ng existing 13-year-old law because these are probably special to the LGU but not nationally. For example, let's say Rafflesia, yung bulaklak namin sa Antique, baaring hindi kasama yon, pero that's pang grade 3, di ba? Kasi special yan sa region. For example, statwa, let's say, ng statwa ng lolo ko sa Sibalom, the first geodetic engineer of Antique. May maliit na statwa sa sementeryo ng Sibalom. Maaring hindi siya mahalaga nationally, pero sa amin, sa Antique, mahalaga siya kasi siyang unang surveyor ng probinsya. So, ganun po. So, under the present IRR of the present law, grade 1 only includes World Heritage Sites, national historical landmarks, national cultural treasures, but we will add also other UNESCO declared properties like memory of the world, etc. So kinokompleto po natin.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. Just for the information of everybody, Mr. President, our current law provides six categories. The cultural property of the country shall be categorized as follows. A, not national cultural treasures. B, important cultural property. C, World Heritage Sites. D, National Historical Shrine. E, National Historical Monument. And F, National Historical Landmark. And the measure proposes the deletion of the six to be replaced by the 3 grade levels. Ganun po yun. And in the opinion of this representation, we are introducing new concept, Mr. President. This is already about the categorization of cultural properties.
I am told, Mr. President, the categories stay. We just rank significance through the grades. Parang grade 1, grade 2. We will not delete this, Mr. President. They're very important. We are just ranking the significance through the grades. And we're adding the grade 3. Grade 3 lang ang sinasama kasi hindi nasama ang grade 3 sa 966. Wala. Ito yung mga lokal na mahalaga na maaring italaga through local ordinances.
So meaning to say, Mr. President, that the six existing categories have been distributed through the
Yes.
grades, the grade levels, maybe grades 2, 1, and 2. But then our proposal, the new provisions will include some new terms or concepts, Mr. President. For example, memory of the world. And it is not, is it in the definition of terms? Wala na. And the measure does not have a definition of terms of memory of the world. So for us who are not, who do not have long memories anymore, Mr. President, because of approaching age of dual citizenship.
Okay.
So what is memory of the world,
Mr. President, that's a UNESCO International Declaration. We can put it in the definition of terms. It was just an example that we placed, but it's a UNESCO Declaration, Memory of the World, Mr. President.
No, it is in the bill, Mr. President.
Yeah, ibig ko
It
sabihin,
will be part of the law if we pass this,
Yes.
and then
Yes.
for all those reading the law, we will be
might
lost.
be
What does
yes,
the law
it is
refer
the
to?
UNESCO Declaration, Mr. President, Memory of the, it's a UNESCO program. We can add that to the definition of terms.
And that's only one term we have encountered, Mr. President, and there may be more, Mr. President.
Yes, but we agree with you that, of course, it must be defined because we don't expect everyone to understand or know what it is, even if it is a UNESCO program.
Can we have an idea, Mr. President, what that means? What is the memory of the world?
Archival. UNACOM. Ito, we have our UNESCO expert here, the Secretary General of UNACOM.
Hindi, ganito,
Yan.
Mr.
Okay. It is, Mr. President, archival heritage, such as the records of Culion. So, memory of the world, we can define it perhaps in more detail, but an example of memory of the world would be archival heritage, such as the records of Culion.
Yes, ma'am. Then there
What-
are recordings of people.
Radio recordings. Oh, Veritas. Yes. Oh, okay. What they mean by memory of the world would be the intangible heritage of events that transpired. So it would be archival material.
So our hosting of the White Russians, could be memory of the world of that place.
If there are records, Mr. President, whether in audio, in video,
Or in writing.
in writing, this could be
Pictures.
pictures, textiles, no, writing on, no, archival materials. archival written materials.
What is that example, Mr. President, given like the records of Culyon? What is
Culyon.
that? What is Culyon?
Culyon
Culyon is a place?
in Leprosa, in the leper colony in Culyon,
Palawan?
Palawan, has archival records. Where are they now? Where are they located?
Ganun pala yun.
The records of Culyon would have how the leprosy was treated, medical treatment of leprosy. And where are the records now? They're in Culyon. And this would fall under Memory of the World Archival Heritage.
They were in Mount the recordings of Maseng from traditional music.
Oh, national artist Maceda. Jose Maceda. Oh, yes, like the recordings of, oh, exciting. National artist Jose Maceda of music. The presidential papers of Manuel L. Quezon. So archival materials relevant to our history, our art, our culture would fall under Memory of the World.
Thank you for that information, Mr. President. At least, we are being enlightened and we understand the measure more. And we appreciate it more.
Yes.
Because of
Imagine the
this
music,
greater
the
understanding.
music of Jose Maceda, our national artist. Wow, I wish yeah, the recordings of his music of Jose Maceda. So it could run from medical records of leprosy treatment in Culyon to even Veritas Radio in 1986 People Power recordings of commentators, historical records of June Kifley to presidential papers of Manuel L. Quezon. Archival materials that are relevant to our nation, our people, and the world. That's why they call it Memory of the World. Oh, I am told that we are nominating the Hokano recordings of Sugid. Where is Sugidanon? Wow, the Sugida. Of the Sugidanon chanting of the island of Panay for UNESCO, intangible heritage. For Memory of the World. We have the recordings? Who kept it?
University of
Okay, exciting. This is exciting. They have discovered, or they have the recordings of the chants of a tribe in Isla Panay, the Sugidanon. Saan yan? Saan sila?
Sugidanon chants of Panay Bukid.
Wow, the chants of the Panay Bukidnon from Kalinog, Iloilo, and from Capiz from the 1950s are in Iloilo. Who has custody of it? And we are submitting it in the Memory of the World.
Chants, therefore, in tape.
Yes,
In
audio.
Audio tape, yeah.
Oh,
audio
it's
tape.
thing. From the 1950s. Imagine natago. So
Good.
all of this, Mr. President, they're so
Right.
valuable to our nationhood, to us as a people. And so that is the reason why we have to make this a part of the law of the land, so that people will, I'm glad you're asking it. It's brought
Yes,
into historical record. And we are enlightened. I'm also learning while
Because we are making this effort, Mr. President, mandatory. We are using the word mandatory on the part of LGUs. So, and it's quite we have to admit, it's quite a complex subject matter, Mr. President, that we need to understand it before enacting it. And those who are expected to also comply and implement it should be able to understand it.
Yes.
So, because of the complexity of the subject matter, when this becomes law, how will those LGUs expected to participate or implement the law be expected also to understand what they are supposed to do, Mr. President? What is the
President.
mechanism, Mr. President?
Of course, number one, we will have capacity building. Number two, Mr. President, technology. That's why we have online platforms to explain the law. And you'd be surprised, LGUs know this better than us. In fact, LGUs have done culture mapping ahead of the enactment of a law. I went to Taal recently. I have a friend who's into culture mapping. They did their culture mapping in Taal 10 years ago on their own initiative, using private sector, their family resources to map the town. Di ba nakakatuwa? And then now they did it 10, 15 years ago, cost them hundreds of thousands of pesos doing their own culture mapping. And they are asking for it to be updated perhaps. So people are doing it in their private capacity. LGUs have done it. As I mentioned, Giwan and many others, Binyan has it. So that is why we hopefully need the law so the NCCA could train LGUs, and the toolkits will be downloaded and assisted by NCCA, the cultural agencies, the other national government agencies like DepEd, CHED.
Yes, Mr. President, I think it's in the measure that the LGU can and should coordinate with the different agencies so for assistance. But then if the figure is only 277 LGUs have
77 lang meron?
kanina, di ba? That was I think the number given, no? And that's maybe not yet 20% of all of the the total municipalities, cities, and provinces, 277 is not yet 20% of the, so.
They said that, because, Mr. President, some people do it on their own. Private sector, they probably don't know that there's a repository and they don't give it, or they keep it within the town. So I'm sure it's more than 277. Sa lista ba nyo, Antique, nandyan na? O hindi?
No.
Oo. So,
Yeah, Mr. President, if the private sector of a certain town or an LGU has started it, although not yet finished it, sabihin na natin has started it, then I think the proper process to follow so that will end up, that information or data will end up with the anong tawag dun? Recap.
yes.
In the pre-cap, it should be first be turned over to the LGU.
To the LGU.
Then it will go all the way up
Yes,
to,
Mr. President.
to the NCCA. So,
example na
so okay, a question ko, why don't they still know that? Why don't they do it? Kasi ang ating sinasabi, hinala lang natin na more than 277, hinala na may private sector na gumawa. Dapat, para maging official yun, they should follow the procedure so that the number of 277 will also improve or increase, Mr. President.
Mr. President, giving it to the pre-CUP is one thing, but doing it on their own, whether as an LGU, municipality, city, or province, or private sector-led, is another. I think there's much, much more than the 277 who have submitted it to the pre-CUP. And because it's not yet enacted into law, at saka who knows about culture mapping? Perhaps those only who are keenly interested. But I've been doing this for 15, 20 years. I've been so interested. That's why no, not 15 years, because in 2009, I was not able to include it into the Heritage Act. That's why now in my fourth term, I hope that this will be a law. No law mandates anyone to map. Sana ma-mandate natin. We are only required under the present law to produce local inventories. That's why, ilista nyo, ilan ang monumento, ilista nyo, ilan ang bahay na luma. Pero there's much more than seeing built heritage, Mr. President. We are losing our languages, Mr. President. We have so many languages. There's an island in Samar that has a very unique language at wala na yung taong nagsasalita. Ano yung Islang yun? Would you remember that? I had a hearing, Kapul. Anong island? Kapul Island. There's a language in Kapul Island in Samar. What part of Samar? Northern Samar, where the language being spoken is gone or almost gone, is fading. So that's so important, right? Yung ating kinakain pagkain, our culinary heritage, the use of different kinds of herbs, even planting, let's say, like batuan. Do you use batuan when your wife, chef, cooks sinigang, or does she use sampalok, or does she use something readily made in the supermarket? I refuse to use anything instant, and I use sampalok or batuan or kamyas or bayabas or something like that. So, culinary, imagine, let 1,000 flowers bloom, whether in tourism, in culinary and gastronomy, in history. This will bring about jobs, culture guides, culinary guides, history guides, so many people and children and educators and learners wanting to do culture mapping. This will even, I think, take away youngsters, the youth from drugs, because it's something they can do as a community. This will bring sense of pride and place and history for our country and our people. It is really exciting. If we mandate this, then we will go on a road show to explain to all LGUs the importance of mapping their tangible and intangible culture. It will empower LGUs outside NCR to tell their stories. We're so Manila-centric. Di ba?
Yes, thank you for that reply, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, I think I need to suspend my interpellation. I cannot terminate it today, Mr. President, because, the exchanges, our exchange, Mr. President, has really excited us. And we need to dig deeper and understand the measure. Because ito lang po, no, when we resume the interpellation, we will have to raise the fact that the grade levels have an implication in the sense that when you are part of a certain grade level, you automatically get additional protection. So it's very important also to discuss that so that the people will know that. And I think that's beyond cultural mapping already, Mr. President. But as I stated earlier, we can adjust the title that it's more than just cultural mapping. We're amending a certain law, 100 RA 166. And then there is also a certain provision there where we are granting as a new power to the commission, Mr. President. So, in the opinion of this representation, this is also beyond cultural mapping already, Mr. President. So we will discuss this, Mr. President, when we resume our interpellation. But we will do it immediately. We can do it tomorrow, Mr. President.
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Teka, suspend mo na. I'll talk to Senator.
Mr. President, move for a minute suspension.
Session suspended.
President, this juncture, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 1841. So move, Mr. President.
There be no objection to the motion. The measure is suspended.
Thank you, Mr. President. What a day for you and a lot of our colleagues today. And
It's been a long day.
it's been a long day. Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move that we
Before
adjourn.
we do that, maybe we can just mention to our colleagues what we had done this morning. Hindi pa natin nabigyan ng official report.
Please, Mr. President.
Yeah, thank you. I was, for my dear colleagues, we were joined this morning by our majority floor leader, Senator Joel Villanueva, Senator J.V. Ejercito, Senator Pia Cayetano, Senator Sherwin Gatchalian, and myself. We visited the wake of Governor Digamo and personally delivered to him the resolution that we approved yesterday, and behalf of to the wife, rather, delivered to the wife, rather, the resolution expressing our condolences, no, as well as the resolution expressing our condemnation on the incident. And they were very happy that they're getting a lot of support from national government officials. At sabi po nga niya, at least hindi po siya nakakalimutan ng national officials. Natatakot po sila no, sa kanilang banta, sa kanilang buhay. Dahil sa banta sa kanilang buhay. And we expressed our support that we will continue to monitor the situation to make sure that they will be given the justice, no, the family, the justice that they deserve. And also, so we did that this morning, and we also gave a donation to the family on behalf of the Senate para matulungan din natin. And
Mr.
eight others that also were, the 8 others that were victims and killed during that massacre, we also extended our help to them.
And we also, it is also noteworthy, Mr. President, that last night, Senators Robin Hood
Yes.
Padilla, Senator Jinggoy Estrada, Senator
Bong
Bongo, and
Revilla.
Senator Bong Revilla also visited last night, Mr. President. It goes to show, Mr. President, that we are all very concerned
And united.
and united in crying for justice for the late Governor Roel Digamo.
Yeah, we thank also our colleagues last night for flying in and coming back at 1 in the morning. So they
Yes.
must be exhausted. Once again, thank you and our deepest condolences to the family of Governor Digamo.
Yes, and prayers also, Mr. President, to Mayor Janice, Board Member Carlo, and their entire family.
The entire family, yes.
Mr. President, with that, I move that we adjourn the session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Wednesday, March 8, 2023. I so move, Mr. President.
There be no objection. The session is adjourned, rather, until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Wednesday, March 8, 2023. Have a safe and good evening, everyone.